think it still wasn't fully clear to us the impact it would have, but it was we were starting to think about the impacts it was going to have on people who were already vulnerable in our community. That was our biggest concern.
We saw this coming down, and so I thought about two things. The first thing I thought about was how to keep our guests and our volunteers safe. Mm-hmm. And we set up new protocols for that. And the first thing we did was to shut down the grocery store for seniors and to redistribute as much of that food as we could. And then that was part of our continuity of operations plan, and it had certain triggers. If you can remember, it seems like 100 years ago, our first trigger was when the schools were closed.
For me, the very first case that was noted here in Chattanooga, I know them personally. And it hit home for me just like that. And not knowing basically what was going to happen. All we knew is, he told us what was transpiring. He was quarantined here. His family was quarantined for 14 days, and he had to go through all of that. And for me, in my community, in my culture, immediately started praying for him, started, trying to make sure he was good. We didn't know what to expect. We really didn't. And then all of a sudden, all these other cases start coming out and start connecting the dots. And then people in various cities begin to pass away, and everybody said they're passing away from COVID. That's alarming. What do you do when something you cannot see, something you cannot touch, that you know you're touching, is killing you? What do you do with that? And still, in the midst of that, still have to figure out how to serve the needs of people.
I can remember on March 13th being in the office late. It was probably around 9:30, and I had a conversation with our CFO and texted the executive board and said, I want to ask your approval to set up a fund, because I think we're going to need resources for relief and flexible resources, because we won't know exactly what's needed until we're in it, and it will continue to unfold because it's an unprecedented situation. Within about 10 minutes, I had that vote back from them. And the next morning, we had $150,000 committed to the fund. And within that week, it came to 500, and the next week it was over $1 million, to listen to community about where the greatest needs were around income stabilization, food, and health. Eventually, those needs became more clear as we went on in terms of what was needed for COVID-19 testing.
The way that we went about forming the process and the voices that would ultimately make the decisions in terms of what was deployed from this moment. That is literally putting community voice at the center to help us make the best decisions possible on behalf of the community. Because these are people who have a very strong understanding of what the needs and issues are on the ground.
I kind of felt like it was a tsunami coming, right? The water pulls away first, and so right after the layoffs began, the shutdown began, it was kind of quiet for just a short period of time, but we absolutely knew that it was going to come crashing down upon us, and just how quickly can we begin to put things in place from that perspective. I think we still continue to iron things out, and we continue to ramp up because we're still trying to prepare for the tsunami. It is still very much in the early stages.
As I started to listen to stories of our students out in the field, in their practicums, in the agencies, and saying, what do I do for this client? What do I do for that client? I realized it was spreading, and it was impacting everything that was already struggling. And I think food became the first thing. I was getting inundated with, messages of help get food to kids who are at home, let's pack sack lunches, and, that kind of hit first.
No one knew what it was. We didn't have a clue what was going to transpire. So we started a food distribution that took place Monday through Friday, and we understood that the need was great. There was something that we were doing that we needed partners. We needed people in the community to come and partner with us.
So as far as how we're faring, I think that we're, as a community, we're doing okay getting accessing resources and getting them into our city. Weekly, I am seeing that we're improving the coordination of those resources. However, we have to keep in mind that we're still facing pre-existing disparities in our community. How do we get to people that have been marginalized, but also how do we get to those people that this is new to them, right? And so they don't know all the access touch points. Are we going deeper into community? And now with the tornado, you have now even more of a challenge.
We actually started a food program back in April as the pandemic was starting to really hit the community, to be able to help families that were really hit the hardest by the virus.
As a community, the folks that I'm in touch with, the service providers, I started to say the person on the street, but nobody's on the street. I'm pretty darn proud of us. What I'm concerned about also is overconfidence. We have to see this bright thing that could be the new way. And I don't know what it is, but I know that this obstacle, this barrier, this tragedy is that portal. I know that for sure. I just don't know what it is.
We have roughly 37,000 senior citizens over the age of 65 in our election data. 20,000 of those folks live in the county. They're not connected to any congregate housing or nursing home, any program that we can see. And so being able to get those people resources and food and things that they need is becoming a very daunting task.
And the students are not going back for the rest of this school year, then they're going to be at least almost a year behind when school does start back in August.
I think another thing that we need to really be looking at, and I think, again, just the tip of the iceberg, is just the socio-emotional support for our students and our families.
What we have to do as a community is care for the people who are doing the caregiving.
For a month from now, I think that we're going to see a spike. The checks are just starting to come from the IRS. The unemployment is just getting filed. So we also see that as a period during which we're going to continue to restock, resupply, and relocate as we need to in order to be the right places for the longer haul.
As soon as we realized what crisis we were facing, we knew for certain that housing instability was going to be a huge problem. Not because a public health crisis would naturally cause an eviction crisis, but because the systems we have in place currently leave a vast portion of our population unstably housed. We see that really any economic downturn, any type of crisis becomes a housing crisis.
When the ban on evictions and cutoffs is over, Katie, bar the door, because it's going to increase our homeless numbers astronomically. We've got to get in front of that.
You had a call from the judges, really sessions judges, who were saying they knew they were going to face these incredible eviction dockets when the courts open. They were already mounting these cases. Anyone who sat in the courtroom knows how devastating eviction is for families, and those judges know that.
With Chattanooga Neighborhood Enterprise Community Foundation of Greater Chattanooga and the City of Chattanooga, we have been able to secure rental assistance for some of the tenants. Because what we don't want, landlords have to have the rental income in order to pay their bills, including their mortgages, on their homes and or their business property. So we understand that and want to make sure that then those landlords, if they're not getting paid, then what happens? There will be foreclosures there. There will be business failures. There will be bankruptcies. So I think that's a good example of working together in the community to address a situation in a meaningful way.
You saw these real leaders in CNE and the Private Bar, Southern Legal Aid coming together and saying, how can we do things differently in this crisis?
It was a real blessing that the community partners came around in the way that they did so quickly. And we have continued to engage partners across the state and even across the country.
The project, when it initiated, was really about meeting immediate need and doing so in a way that brought more fairness into the legal process by providing representation to tenants facing eviction. And in doing so, there was the hope that the project would also elevate and demonstrate that there were larger systemic needs. To your point, why are we so vulnerable? Like, why isn't our community more resilient to crisis or to trauma? Why are there so many households and families that weren't able to withstand shocks in multiple income brackets, not just very low income?
My hope is that through the pandemic, we're able to see this as a community crisis. And we have a real opportunity here to look and say, we can do this differently. This has come to a head. And because of that, there's been some funding opportunities that have come, and we put that in play. That's a Band-Aid. That is a Band-Aid. If we throw money out there and walk away from these people, that is all the more egregious, and we have the same situation. So I do think it has been exasperated, but I think we're at a real opportunity for change. I don't think we have to go back to doing it the way we were doing it.
It's brought new light, new attention, new partners, new resources, and we have a real opportunity to seize that and to say, how can we change what we're doing in the future, even after the pandemic?
Somebody, I don't know if it's community foundation, I don't know, but somebody needs to initiate a community-based crisis management team and strategy. What does that look like if you could get a corporate partner and a grassroots group and a faith partner all on one accord?
What I don't want to see in this discussion is miles and miles of discussion. I don't want bureaucratic stuff.
This is going to be a long-term situation. And please don't lose focus on the fact that even as the health crisis ends, the economic crisis and impact is going to go on for a very, very long time. And we will continue to be part of the conversation and let you know what our needs are, but let you also know how we can step in and support the community, because that's what we want.
This is a marathon, it's not a sprint. And so recognizing that's what I've tried to equip our team to do as well, is recognize that while we just being doers and loving our community so much, really want to just respond to all of the needs, we have to figure out and be sure that we're also including an element of self-care and recognizing that we can't be everything to everyone. And that's a hard one when you're working through a crisis.
With this program, I knew all the right players and all the right minds were at the table to think through it, that we had backers and supporters and experts in their areas who were all at the table to try to find a way to make this program work to meet the need. But it does feel like there is this larger, ever-growing kind of snowball tidal wave. It feels like moving into 2021 that we're just going to be facing something bigger than what we thought we were going to be facing in March 2020.
And to make it a Chattanooga priority, a Chattanooga issue, a community issue, that will be a win. I think if we walk away from this without implicating these policies, we will have lost a real moment.
Food assistance to families that need it, along with basic rent assistance for those who are having trouble paying the rent, staying under roof during these hard times, especially with the loss of jobs and a loss of income. But on top of that, we understand that losing somebody to COVID is a hard reality. And so being transparent about those things and coming together and really encouraging each other to help the other person, to be there in whatever way possible, and to just really talk about how COVID is not just affecting our health physically, but also mentally, financially, emotionally. It's very important because we're going to be battling this for a while, and we need to come together as a community to do so.
There's a responsibility, of course, as a foundation and leaders in the community to respond to immediate need, which is great. But there's also an opportunity and a responsibility to look for the more systematic and systemic changes that can take place. That this moment isn't lost. The opportunities of this moment aren't lost in that we can work to change systems that weren't working great before, so that they can serve our vulnerable populations better in the future, so that we can prevent the sort of backslide that we're seeing into economic vulnerability